Sarthak, tell me about the shirt that you're wearing.
It's a basic H&M really, the brand that Sabyasachi recently collaborated with. So I'm quite a diva when it comes to fashion.
You wrote an interesting post about natural fibers, silk farming, ReshaMandi, which was fascinating. And that's how we connected. Do you ever think about the fiber that actually goes into making all our clothes? Now, that could be a basic shirt like yours or a designer brand like Sabyasachi probably uses in making all those expensive lehengas.
I think almost never. The only idea I would have about the origin of the thread or the fabric is that I mostly prefer to wear cotton, and cotton comes from a lot of the apparel from your Cambodia and Vietnam and these Southeast Asian countries. But apart from that, I have no idea. I mean, I'm not wearing any Banarasi saris anyways, so can't say where it's from.
And won't it be interesting if we figured out how that works and how intriguing that whole process is from farm to yarn?
I think on the one hand, sustainable fashion is becoming such a big thing and is probably why companies like Shein and in fact other fast fashion companies like Zara and H&M again have received a lot of bad rep. But apart from that, how I discovered ReshaMandi was quite interesting. I was sitting with a friend who works in venture debt and we were trying to test each other's knowledge about interesting startups for Bharat. And he threw a question at me, which was, do you know this B2B startup for Bharat, which did more than 400 crores of revenue in the second year of operations and crossed 2000 crores in the third year, is almost at break even. I could have never guessed that this would be a startup solving for B2B supply chains in the silk industry, which turned out to be ReshaMandi. So when I dug deeper to find out more insights on the business and what they were really solving for, and if the market was really this big, I found so many facts which I couldn't stop myself from sharing with my audience on LinkedIn and Instagram. And that's how we connected, which is great.
Welcome to episode 75 of the 1% Project, the podcast that delves into the ideas and the insights of the most innovative minds, pushing boundaries to create a meaningful impact. I am Pritish Sanyal.
And I'm Sarthak Ahuja.
We are your hosts. And to deep dive in the banter that you just heard before this, we invited Mayank, the co-founder of ReshaMandi, to talk about the natural fiber industry, the unit economics of the business, the challenges and the opportunities. He talks about Fab India, Levi's, and much more. So we kicked it off by asking Mayank about India's association with natural fiber.
India has been an agrarian society. Primarily, our farmers have tried everything. They've tried pulses, they've tried potato, tomato, they've also tried natural fibers. Now, natural fibers, as a story, if you see, India is a cotton producing state. We've been a wool producing state. Silk to India was introduced around Indus Valley. So that is also a very ancient history here. Most of the farmers look for conduciveness of the climate, basis which they define whether they want to go for a cash crop or they want to go for something which is more pulses and potatoes, tomatoes, something which is known to the rest of the farmers who are in their vicinity. Most of these farmers who have started working on cotton or silk, they started working on it primarily because they found that these cash crops from a per acre yield basis can possibly generate a higher return for them. So if you go to Maharashtra today, you will ask a cotton farmer as to why do you, and they will talk about how their crop gets ruined because of rains, droughts, this, that, everything. But they still continue to do it, or they continue to decide the crop basis the rotation of the crop. So sometimes they will do a soybean, sometimes they will do cotton, sometimes something else. They'll continue to rotate the crop, deciding as to what is giving them a better yield, what is giving them a better return. While in silk's case, it's completely different. If the farmer has gone into silk, he has already planted mulberry on his plantation. And from that point on, the moment you're planting a sapling of mulberry, it continues for 25 years. It's almost like you would have eaten shahdud in your childhood. Shahdud is nothing but mulberry. So it's exactly the same thing. It's just that the farmer has to cut it at the shrub level to be able to feed the tender leaves to the silkworm rather than making it a tree. That's it. Otherwise, it continues for 25, 30 years. It has a lifespan. If you make it a tree, it has a better lifespan than that. So if the farmer has planted mulberry, they don't rotate any crop. They continue to just foster with silkworms. Go towards the shepherd community of wool. And again, the same thing you will realize. If they are shepherds, it's their either primary or secondary income. It's not the tertiary income. Now, most of these shepherds are Banjara tribes. They're nomadic tribes. They're moving around. And because they're moving around, they're not owning lands. And if they're not owning lands, the only primary occupation that they are doing is either to cultivate wherever they are, a small portion of it, or to be able to use their sheeps as the return on investment. So every natural fiber has its own different stories and as to why farmers choose to go with them. India has a very, very, very long history around them. But India in between, if you look at our industrial revolution, so to say, that has happened in India, I'm not talking about the English industrial revolution. Our industrial revolution happened primarily after our independence. And then from that point on till 70s, 80s, we were still exploring what to industrialize. In that industrialization, we industrialized textile in India. Look at our older textile mills, which were there during East India Companies and Britishers period. We were primarily cotton producing mills. We shifted, pivoted, moved towards polyester. Now we are a petrochemical backed industry, which has a heavy duty reliance. The name itself defines it on this industrialization. The industry shifted and hence the farmers of India, the people who were producing natural fibers went into oblivion because government started giving out schemes on MF, which is primarily man-made fibers. The schemes on natural fibers were far and few in between. There was no industrialization or no practice of increasing their productivity or efficiency that was there. And hence the oblivion, hence us not getting the international orders, hence our exports shrinking. Hence in silk, while India is number 2 producer and number 1 consumer, we are still an import deficit country. We are still relying on China giving us some silk yarn for our Banarsi weaver to produce a Banarsi sari. The reason being there is after the industrial revolution and after us shifting our focus to man-made fibers, this whole industry took a very different shape. If you ask anyone today as to which is the brand they would like to buy a natural fiber from, they will say, I want to buy it from Suta Bombay because they are coming up with a story which defines that, it's a hand spun yarn and a handloom weaver, but it's not that story. It's an industrialized practice. It's been there for very long. Raymond uses wool in the jackets he wears. Nobody talks about that story. That's the story of ReshaMandi and not the story of these marginalized sectors. We're not trying to create a brand on the back of saying, ye bichare hain or inko support karo. That's not the story. The story is everybody has a P&L, everybody has a profit and loss account. Add to their profitability, everybody becomes part of your ecosystem.
I have a very dear friend, probably one of my oldest friends. His family business is in Astar ka kapda. His father and he started coming to China a lot. And I asked him, why are you coming here? He said, because people wear jackets on the bikes to just obstruct dust. People have stopped using wool.
Correct.
And they've got into jackets, which are basically made of polyester. And all of that is actually coming or sourced, some kind of raw material of the finished product from China. Then I realized not only the stories that you're talking about, but also the consumption pattern of the consumer has changed.
Yeah.
So definitely the farmer in India probably is getting marginalized in multiple ways. Having said that, you talked about silk. I think in 2015, 2016, China was like 5x more in terms of production compared to what India was. China, I think post-pandemic, because of pandemic, maybe have considerably reduced, but the Indian production hasn't grown that much. So what are the reasons around it? And given that you are building that infrastructure, what are the challenges? And you're saying that India is a silk deficit market.
So First about the consumption pattern, then I'll come to as to why have this shift not happened and automatically us getting the demand in. The first part, the consumption part has changed, and it has changed over the course of every 10 years. The consumption pattern changes. If you really look at fashion industry, even in India, sarees. I'm not going international because that's out of context for ReshaMandi. I'll come to international context in some. But from the domestic standpoint, look at sarees. Now, if you while you were kids, possibly in early 80s, late 80s, it was Parak sarees and Vimal sarees and all those garden sarees, possibly all your satin, polyester satin, silk satin is what was flourishing in the market. At that time, the Surat industry came up. They created brands. Then all of a sudden in 90s, there was a shift because our heroines started wearing Georgettes and chiffons. All our moms, all our grandmoms, you wanted to wear those Georgettes, chiffons, and again polyester backed. When they got married, if you look at their history, you will realize their wardrobe is filled with Banarsi silks and Kanjivarams. They weren't wearing these chiffons and polyester. So the shift has happened. Then came the early 2000s where we started printing, we started doing surface ornamentation, embroideries, and then we mechanized that. Initially, it was hand done. We had chicken curry and we had lovely embroideries across India. We didn't use them. We just replicated them, put them onto computerized embroideries. And that's what we got into our wardrobe. And today, finally, when we talk about the last decade, you will see there is a certain kind of a change in mindset that is happening in the consumer, where people have started going and asking the brands as to where are you sourcing this from? If you are a Tanira, you need to tell me that this Dharmavaram is actually Dharmavaram. I'm paying you 30,000 rupees for this. Thanks God for that. At least the communities will not suffer because somebody is creating a brand on back of their plight. Now coming to the international side, the story that you said, people started wearing these cover-ups. I'm also wearing a t-shirt that's possibly a recycled polyester, but at least it's a recycled polyester. I take pride in that. I'm not wearing something that's a virgin plastic. Then that's a bigger issue. The issue with us is when we mechanized and when we started looking at our own convenience, we also started looking at how is our purchase power looking like to us. Most of our purchase power depleted. If you look at our parents, their purchase power was better than my grandparents. Honestly, my purchase power is better than my parents' purchase power. And similarly, it will be the case for my kid. Now, when my parents were there, they used to go to a tailor to get their shirt made or a trouser made. When we were growing up, we used to go to this tailor, but now for us, it's basically a Lee or a Levi's. Don't go to these tailors. And that ready-made garment has taken up the shape of fashion industry. That's because of our purchase power parity. It's moving up and up. And because of that, you have dispensable income. And when you have dispensable income, you want to splurge, but you want to splurge fast. Your purchase power allows you to change your fashion every month. And because of that 1 month cycle that you have, you want to buy something that is on the shelf for only a month, 2 months, and you can change it. Specifically true in women's wear case. Menswear is still fine. You go in, you buy 5 shirts, you come back, and then you try and use those 5 shirts for 2-3 months, and then you go back to a show. In women's wear, they want to explore, they want to buy more, and every time they go back to their wardrobe, they want to buy more. That is women's wear, and that is what all the brands started catering to. Price points, value for money. There is Zudio still, right? In India, that got introduced by Tata, or a Reliance trend introduced by Reliance. These are not catering to people who have possibly a dispensable income of 1 lakh rupees every month. They're catering to people who have a dispensable income of 25,000, 30,000 rupees because they want to sell a t-shirt of 200 rupees. If it's a MRP of 200 or 300 rupees, basically, at least with the markup of 100%, you're expecting the price to be around 125 rupees to 150 rupees. Half of the garment price is fabric. That's the general standardization. So if it's 150 rupee t-shirt that's on the cost price, you're expecting 75 rupees worth of a fabric. Now a cotton can't compete. And hence the shift. So people started moving towards these man-made fibers. But if you look at the international market, what has started happening is that India is yet to see the day of light on here, but the European Union and US has started putting regulation on being able to ask their retailers that you need to tell me what is your traceability of the supply chain looking like? A, are you sustainable in this supply chain? B, C, what is the compliances that you are following and asking your vendors to follow? M&S got sued for that. Puma got sued for it. There are multiple brands who got into multi-million dollar legal fights because they weren't able to trace their supply chain or weren't able to conducively say that there is no child labor here. There is all compliances are being followed. And consumer pattern in US and Europe has shifted. It has shifted towards asking these questions to the brands and hence the regulation. And because of that regulation, the China plus one strategy emerged in textile and apparel industry, where now all of a sudden H&M, who was the biggest buyer in China, wants to come to India, wants to go to Brazil, wants to go to Egypt, Turkey. They are exploring their avenues. A Turkey fabric producer who's possibly working with almost all the brands of $1.5 billion turnover every year is never worked with India because India is subpar. They don't deliver quality. They don't deliver consistency. Today, if they don't diversify the base to India, God knows what will happen. Will the brands continue to order through them? And hence, the need for India to emerge, the problem as to why India didn't emerge. Possibly we should have emerged during COVID. There was such a rampant demand for textiles. People wanted to order. It's not that fashion cycle will stop at any given point in time. The only change would be rather than me buying formals, I will move towards casual and activewear. That's the only change. But you won't stop wearing garments. You won't stop changing your curtain or your home furnishings. The change was, did the industry take over that demand? No. Industry couldn't take over that demand because there was no compliances in check. We didn't knew our own supply chains. Now, go talk to a Raymond. Raymonds have an export unit, which basically works with different brands, providing them jackets. They have a Yavatmal unit where they are manufacturing the fabrics. But other than that, can they trace? Can they go back and say, okay, this wool has come from this particular part of the world? I'm not saying India, the world. You've been procuring wool for very long. But the over-reliance on these traders who are the middlemen of the supply chain doesn't allow you to penetrate the supply chain. And because of that information asymmetry, you're not able to pass on the information to your customers as well. Same story if you go to any kind of an export unit, any kind of a domestic unit, they do what they do best, which is apparel manufacturing and buying the fabric. Most of the time, the brand themselves define who will be the fabric vendor. You're buying the fabric from a nominated vendor and hence the traceability till fabric. But the fabric guy is not giving you the traceability to yarn or the twisting or the blends that he's procuring or the dyeing that he is doing. Can he assure you that it's an azo-free dyeing and there is no carcinogenic substances in it? All that nobody's checking. And hence, we were not able to capture this huge latent demand that was existing. So, yeah, so India is yet to be able to, I think what we needed is a platform which basically can tell that, listen, I can penetrate this entire supply chain. I will assure you there is compliances. And if there is no compliances, I'm going to take the blame. Because Arvind wants to seclude themselves from that. They don't want a P&L hit. They don't want a balance sheet hit. If you are ready to take that risk, you can take over that demand very, very easily.
You talked that the fashion trends keeps changing. And you talked about movie stars. Now, obviously, we have Sarthak, who's a social media influencer.
Right.
So these days, Are fashion trends changing because of influencers such as Sarthak, or is still connected to what Shah Rukh Khan is wearing, what Deepika Padukone is wearing? So how is the fashion trend changing? Who's influencing it the most?
Fashion, fashion has three theories. Okay. A trickle down theory, which is what we are talking about, a film star wearing it, cricketer wearing it, influencer wearing it, trickling it down, and then you finding it in a department store, and then the clearance bits. That's your trickle down. The trickle up is street fashion becomes fashion. You go to Dharavi, somebody has cut his denim in a very particular way. A designer looks at it, makes it fashion. That's another way as to how fashion gets translated. The third and the most important part is a trickle across theory. I love the t-shirt that Sarthak is wearing. I want to buy it. I'll ask him, where have you bought it from? Simple theories. So if you ask as to how the fashion gets translated in today's world, it gets translated in all these three ways. Yes, if Sarthak is wearing a nice, there are many influencers who have become fashion influencers, though that's not their fashion content. That's not their main content, but they've become fashion influencers by the virtue of the content that they are doing, and brands want to get associated to them. So hence, the fashion gets trickled down that way as well. The other aspect is fashion also goes upwards. Primarily, if you go to any street, you will find these young millennials. They can't afford a brand, possibly, but they will go to Sarojini Chowk, Sarojini Nagar, and then they'll cut that t-shirt. They'll do something with it. That can influence fashion also, and that can influence fashion brands as well. So then, of course, the simplest way of trickling down fashion or trickling across fashion is I like a pink shoe, you like a pink shoe, both of us bought a pink shoe. That's pink has had many connotation in India, but today it's become very normal for us to wear it. Like I have my head of strategy who spends, I think, close to 1.5 lakhs every month on shoes. I have never seen a man spending that much money on shoe, but he loves it. He will go to Air Jordans and just buy Air Jordan on a whim. I've seen men today exploring watches. I don't think our father used to do it. Like they will have this HMT or a Titan watch they would have bought during their wedding. And that gold watch will continue for life. For us, now we have a watch case. We're exploring. So that exploration has started, and hence the fashion industry changes every time. And there are micro trends that comes in and goes. There are major trends that continues. And then there are contemporary classics that they are continuing for very long. The Chanel black dress continues. Today also, there are girls who will die to wear it. A Nehru jacket, a contemporary classic from the most old age that you can think of. Your great-grandfather would have worn it. You also love to wear it. So these contemporary classic continues. And then there are these micro trends that happens. They come in a blip of a radar and then just, all of a sudden you won't find it. Like the Salman Khan hairstyle in Tere Naam came, went. Today you won't find somebody doing that kind of a hairdo. But at that point in time, even John Abraham was with straight and longer hairs. So these are different kinds of fashions that you will continue to see evolving. And basis that the brand continues to evolve. The problem and the challenge in India is none of the brands take a precedence in being able to decide what will be the fashion forecast for India. Most of us follow a fashion forecast that is conducive for Europe or US. Promo Steel and Vogue is what we read. Our fashion designers read. We go to London Fashion Week and New York Fashion Week to read what they are making. And then it comes percolating down to India. All of a sudden, sequins have become like a big thing in Indian fashion. In the last fashion show, if you've seen the last couple of fashion shows, you'll realize that structured polyester and blings all over the place has become this in thing. But if you look at the background, you will realize that the international shows were already showing it a year back or 6 months back. And hence, it's just percolating down in fashion for us. But nobody knows what should be Indian fashion because your skin type Your body type is very different than my skin type and my body type. I hail from hills. I'm born and brought up in MP, but I'm basically from Almora. You are from different part of this country, and this country has such a big diversification. We have a Mongolian-looking tribe in Northeast, and we have Pathani Jards in the West. How will you make fashion for both of them same? It's not possible. You need to understand these microclimates to be able to give them fashion. But none of our brands do that. We don't have an influencer in the brand itself. They're not influencing fashion. They're just following trends.
So I think so many questions keep coming to my mind. And of course, we wanted you to take us through the entire value chain that ReshaMandi solves for. Where first we thought it's a logistics and a supply chain management company. And then we realized that it's equally much a data company where it's capturing a lot of data, possibly helping farmers and people across the value chain with Internet of Things, IoT devices. We'd love to know what you measure, how these people use it. And then we saw that there is Resha Weave. So you're also competing with Fab India. And now I see that you're talking about picking up trends and defining that for India, when I think that the only company I know of which possibly does a trend analysis is like a Pantone, which will come up with the summer collection color that everyone should follow. So can you walk us through really what all are the things in the entire value chain that you solve, and also map it with where do you see the real profit pool is? Because now we feel a lot of it could be ancillaries getting added, because if there is a profit opportunity, let's not let go of it. But what do you think would be the absolute core business from an impact perspective? And then more importantly, also from a profit perspective.
Let's understand the fashion textile industry's chain as such, right? So let's start from consumer. I'm going back in the supply chain. Start from the consumer. That's where you're buying your shirts and your sarees. You're buying it from a retail counter or a brand counter. That brand has a buying team or a sourcing team behind them if it's a corporate brand. But if it's a SME retailer, he is choosing. The mindset is of Lalaji's. Basically, that guy tries and assimilate his thought. He's not looking at data, but he's assimilating his thought that this would look good for my consumer. And hence his calculation of sales throughput. That order is placed with a trader, generally, if it's a SME retailer. And if it's a corporate brand, they're placing the order with the corporate apparel house. This apparel house or a home furnishing house is manufacturing on behalf of this SME retailer or a corporate brand. Then the fabric manufacturing in the back. The auxiliary industry there would be your dyeing, merchandising, mercerization, your finishing industry and all that. Trim industry also coming in, like your buttons and your zippers. Behind the scene of a fabric manufacturing is the yarn manufacturing. In cotton, it will be ginning and spinning units. In silk, it will be reeling units. The processing for different yarns. But again, there is a diversification there where you are blending the yarns as well together. A cotton fuses with viscose and becomes cotton viscose, or a polyester viscose, or a silk cotton, or things like that. So there is fusion of yarns that you can also do. Then behind the scene of a yarn manufacturer is the farmer or an industry like viscose, which is more of an industrial type, taking an input. If it's the three segment that we spoke about, man-made, regenerated, and the natural fiber. Man-made has the input connection to the petrochemical industry, which is your polyesters and nylons. Then you have viscose, rayon, and otherwise that is an experimentation. Primarily, it's lab-made or mill-made, but the basic input that is provided to that is the pulp. It's almost like paper. Paper industry has pulp as the input, and finally the paper. Similarly, the viscose rayon industry has pulp in the background as the input. The farmer, however, has different inputs for different crops. If it's a cotton, farmer will have a cotton seed input and different fertilizers, pesticides, and otherwise. Similarly, if it's a silk farmer, he is looking at silkworms as an input. Behind the silk farmer, the silkworm is coming from a chaki rearing center. That guy, think of him as a poultry guy who is basically hatching the egg, making a chicken. That chick goes to the farm. which is where it becomes a hen and then finally goes to a slaughterhouse. Similar story in silk's case, where you have a egg producing unit, a chaki, which is basically hatching the egg, making a larva going to a farmer, 21-day cycle, make the cocoon, sell it off in the industry, and then the yarn manufacturing, silk sarees, finally the retail counter and the consumer. So that's the entire premise. So ReshaMandi, where do we work and how do we kind of provide value to it? Our value proposition is sourcing, right quality, right point in time, and at right price, so that there is transparency. If you are buying at right price and right quality and you're buying at right point in time, then your efficiency go up. Your efficiency go up, your profitability go up. Second service that we provide is demand. Can we give you perennial demand? Can we then also look at what is the catalog that you are producing yourself and try and be more effective about? So can we diversify your demand base? As specifically in different segments, like a yarn manufacturing segment to a textile segment, have different problem statements. Sometimes it's a consistency of quality that they are not able to provide. You go to Vardhman, you may be able to get a better yarn and hence a 10-20 rupees extra cost versus the same spinning unit who's just beside Vardhman might not be able to give the same consistency in quality. So if they have perennial demand, they can maintain quality and they can continue to run without having any thinking of how is my overheads looking. The third part is merchandising. Can I give you categorization of what SKUs to produce? Which is selling in the market? Where is this demand coming from? If I can tell you that if you can run your machine by reduce your efficiency by 5-10%, don't run it at the full speeds, but you'll effectively be able to get a yarn or a textile which is better in quality and hence 10 rupees more in terms of your profitability. It's better to do that instead of being just continuing to run your factory. Then the fourth part is how do I automate all these processes with? Like in the farms sector, we've automated through our IoT devices and advisory where we tell the farmer, don't irrigate today. Simple analogy here is you, me, Sarthak, all of us water our plants every day. The plant behind Sarthak, he would love to water it. Primarily because that's a very, very Indian mindset that we have. We've been told to do it without any scientific reason to. But plants have needs of water. It doesn't require water. Like in the silk's case, the mulberry is a semi-arid crop. It can effectively grow in Thar desert as well. It can survive. Shahtut you can find everywhere in India when you were growing up. Rigved also talks about mulberry. Every household should have one. So if it is that very sturdy crop, why are you watering it? And then when we put our IoT device, we realize that the farmers can save water by just following our advisory and increase the productivity on a per acre for the mulberry leaves itself. There are two ways as to how you can grow your profitability here is either you sell the extra production that you have of mulberry leaf to somebody who's not being able to have that production. Second, increase the rearing shed size where you are feeding the silkworms. There are only two ways to go about. Now, rearing shed, IoT device is primarily doing the same story. Rearing shed is nothing but this room. Think of it like this room with 6 windows on either side and it can open. That's it. That's what a rearing shed looks like. Silkworms on different beds and mulberry leaves being fed to them. You're handling living organisms here. If you can just increase the rearing shed just by putting more concrete on top, you can effectively increase your productivity as well. So rather than if I'm increasing 40% in my mulberry production, I can also increase 40% in my input production on the silkworm side. Hence the overall percentage of profit that you are going to have from a per acre itself. The last aspect is how do I help you with financing and insurance options? So financing, we realized it's a working capital intensive, right? This is during our Series A itself. We realized it's a very, very heavy working capital intensive game. There is challenge at SME retailers side where they are not able to conducively know when is the customer footfall going to come in? And hence they can't define what will be their working capital. And none of the NBFCs and banks wants to work with them. Primarily, they also can't understand their working capital. Same story with textile mills, same story with apparel houses. If you read articles, you will realize that the mills in India are facing troubles. Ginning units in India are facing trouble. Spinning units in India are facing trouble. Retailers don't have consumption. The entire supply chain takes effect because the consumers stop. The taxpayers don't have us purchase power right now, and the entire supply chain takes the toll on it. The other aspect is if you look at the corporate brands also, you will realize in their quarterly filings that their DPO days are closer to 200 days, which means they are also delaying their payments to their suppliers. And hence the supply chain again will have a working capital. So we said if we are doing transactions, and we were anyways giving credit to all of these guys. So we understood that credit. Today also ReshaMandi has a large exposure in the market basis the turnover that we have done. So we understand that credit is the game here. We can't change that. I can't say that, no, I can't give credit. I just need to figure out how do I seclude my balance sheet and how do I secure his balance sheet as well. That's the only game that both of us can play. And if we need to do it, we need to have securitization of financing and a securitization through insurance as well. Can I put both of this together and then go to NBFCs and banks who have been working with ReshaMandi, can back ReshaMandi, can think of us as an anchor, and then go into our supply chain and be able to give out financing options to them, be able to give out insurance options to them. And when we started lending from our books, we started giving them buy now, pay later options, and invoice discounting options. These were some small experiments that we wanted to do for the last 9 months we've been doing. We grew in AUM to 35 crores. And then we started reducing our AUM from the market because now we know that we need an NBFC license. The other aspect is we launched insurance programs in the market again to test waters. We launched something with AIC, Agriculture Insurance Company of India. This is India's first sericulture program on insurance, primarily parametric based, where farmers do not have to go to any insurance company to even claim the insurance. Through the parameters, we've already marked area and the acreage, and we know that the farmers can directly get the input cost cover. Similarly, we have something in collaboration with OnSurety for our stakeholders where they cover life and health for themselves. It's deep discounted, but the other aspect is, like I said, somebody has to say to the world that we are compliant. And if I need to be compliant, how do I become compliant? For that, I need to know who's the labor working in the factory. So we then in turn went to all these factory owners and said, we'll do a very marked down price for insurance. Most of these guys work for you on a daily wage basis and hence shifting their allegiance to somebody else because of 10 rupee. Here is an insurance program that you can give it to them for 20, 25 rupees a month. And it will cover their health, it will cover their life, and you can renew it every month, which means it's a flexibility that you have. So if you've taken a cover of 100 people, and there is a new person who's coming in and this older guy going out, you can always block the older guy, add the new guy, and then increase your retention rate. Your retention rate goes up, I get the KYC, we are all done. These are the 5 different things as to how we look at the supply chain and how we work with any one of them. So be it the retailer where we give out a forecast as to what he should buy, somebody sitting in Panvel in Mumbai versus Bandra where there is a lot of fashion influence. Both of them will have different choices. Even the retailers on our app will have different choices. So when we are giving fashion forecast to this 2 different guys, there are 2 different fashion forecasts approximating. Colors choices will be different. And then we will say, here is an automated buy plan. You don't have to create one. We become your buyer. We are telling you buy this. It's easier for any human to say no to things than saying yes to things. That's just the human tendency. So if I'm giving you a pre-filled form, you will say, hey, my name is wrong. And you will rub it and you will change. But if I give you a blank form, Pritish will never write his name there. So that's how we work on human psychology as well. It's more of user experience as to how you allow people to continue to engage with. Once you have given the fashion forecast, once you have given an automated pipeline, you already have created a demand, and that demand can percolate into your fashion supply chain. The supply chain continues to then go back paddle into the demand and the supply for the others, and hence the perenniality of the demand and supply, and you being able to associate the supplier to a right set of buyers and know exactly what your margin would be in that particular transaction every time. So then it becomes a flywheel.
Why is the mulberry leaf or shahtut mentioned in the Vedic scriptures?
Mulberry has medicinal properties, and mulberry also purifies air to a very large extent. And because of both these properties of Ayurveda, that Rig Veda defines it as a plant that almost all Indian households should have. One, it keeps the air around you pure, and it allows for negative energies to go out, is what is said in Rig Veda. Mulberry is a very nice fruit. It's a fruit which has a berry feeling to it, and it's very juicy. There's less of insecticides and pesticides in it because it's a sturdy crop. It doesn't require anything, right? So you won't have to worry about it too much. It's not like strawberry where you have to worry about them. Mulberries are very, very sturdy. And plus, it doesn't consume a lot of water from your water table. So because of that, it allows for your water table to continue to remain. Soil degradation reduces and things like that. Yeah.
You said 50% of the cost is the material. I want to understand how much is the brand name?
How much is the brand name? Different brand has different ways of looking at it. If you are a fashion brand, somebody like my first employer of Ugan, you're increasing from the cost price approximately 4x to 5x. That after you include the overheads. So all your material cost, all your stitching cost, everything put together, that's your cost price, then the overheads of the company, and then you have a effective cost price. You increase that by 4-5x, and that becomes the brand price. Brand is pricing it such, specifically the high designer wear, they are worried it may end up in a trunk. Somebody might not buy it because they are manufacturing for a very elite customer. Elite customer choices differ very fast. They change very fast. If somebody has gone to Paris and seen something, they may not like anything from an Indian designer there, right? So it's really very difficult as an industry for them. And hence the survival is primarily by escalating cost. The other aspect is there is a theory around it, and I believe you both would know better than me on the economic side of things. But it is said if you are in a luxury segment, the more you increase the cost, the more exclusive it becomes and the more consumer demand you drive. Hence, the Sabyasachi Lehenga it fell. Yes. Or a Pallijay Kishwan, etc. Right? So the difference is it's so exclusive, raw mariner, that you might not be able to purchase, and hence you will fall in line for it. For a consumer, they don't care as to how much are they paying for it. They care about the exclusivity and the customer segment as such. But if you go to a departmental store or a large value retailer or somebody like a Walmart or a Target, they are concerned about every cent, every dime that's there. And they're concerned primarily because they need to sell you a shirt at $2.99, a white plain cotton shirt. That's hard. Even for the factories that are working on that supply chain, it's hard for them because meeting that price point every time, every month, doing shipments back to back requires for the cotton prices to be stable. If the cotton prices are not stable, I'm going to look for hoarding at the time when the prices are down. Now, if you're going for Levi's, I don't have any NDA with them, so I can't disclose this. I did my graduation project, and this I'm talking about 2007, okay? And I was with Raymond's export unit. Levi's were getting manufactured at 250 rupees. This is Levi's 511. Something that both of us wear. How much are we paying for it? Like even in 2007, I think we were paying around 4,500 rupees for that jeans. And I was shocked when I looked at the merchandising costing sheet. I was like, wow, this is like fabulous margin. If you look at the overall, like this was the cost price at the ex factory level. But if you add the shipping cost and the logistics and the import and the export duties and otherwise and the distribution that Levi's have to do beyond it, possibly another addition of 250 to 300 rupees there. But yes, that's the margin that the brand has. Now, if the brand is like for a denim, they have a CAC of around 2000 rupees, assuming Levi's has a CAC, then yes, pricing it at 5,000 rupees, I'll understand it because you're anyways spending 1,000 rupees in shipment, procuring the goods, 2,000 rupees, being able to get the customer indoors, and then you have 2,000 rupee profit. Absolutely fine. But there are brands which doesn't have any kind of a CAC involved. It's just the brand's already evolved so much that you will pay whatever it comes. An Apple iPhone. The brand doesn't have to come out with a story or an ad that entices you any. They talk about features on their ad. There's no brand endorsement. They're basically saying my camera is better than the other camera or something of that sort. Like they don't have a brand endorsement or somebody up there or paying them crores and crores rupees to endorse their brand. Different brands have different kind of cost price structures within them. But the supply chain behind, you will realize that has a fixed margin component. The margin that if you go from the retailer all the way to the farmer, 20 to 30% of the margin profile is with dealers, distributors, and traders. They add value. Okay, the value addition that a trader or a dealer and distributor is doing is primarily about financing this industry. They are the guys financing it. They are the Marwadis and Banyans. They are the Arhartiyas of this industry. And nothing bad in it. If you know the game, play it. Why not? The whole challenge is they create information asymmetry. What is the information asymmetry? You go to a yarn manufacturer and say, listen, India produces the lowest grade of the yarn. Hence, the highest of the yarn versus the lowest grade, you're looking at 2,500 rupees in terms of the per kg rate itself. Now, if I am as a trader saying that India is producing the cheapest quality, I'm going to pay you 2,500 less. I'm not going to allow you to get the testing done. I will in turn do the testing at my end. Then when I go to the dealer or a distributor, I will tell him, choose what you want, smoothness or the thickness. I will only assure you one thing. I'm not going to assure you two things. Have to choose because I'm hoarding, right? He can check with 10 of my friends, but those 10 friends, we can cartelize against you. We can cartelize against the entire industry if we need. And hence the viewer has to pay whatever cost it is. So by the time this guy has got, let's suppose 500 rupees, by the time it translates into a yarn going to a viewer, there will be an addition of around 100 to 200 rupees. Viewer is paying more, yarn manufacturer is getting lesser. The guy in the middle who's financing the game because he could hoard is making the margin. Both of them have the same margin profile. That margin profile is not changing. So again, the same thing if you go towards the farmer. They go to a Baramati Mandi or a Ramnagar Mandi. Nobody cares about our farmers. Nobody cares. Mandis don't care about the yarn manufacturer. So for them, it's a platform. Come, go, whatever, do whatever. I don't care. There is an auction. At the time of the auction, you get 200 rupees, you get 400 rupees, you accept the price. I have no bearing on it. It's almost like Flipkart saying, I have no bearing on what my supplier is producing or giving. There is an indemnity there. Same thing. The government markets have indemnities. Saying, boss, I have no bearing in this trade. I'm going to make my 2% margin. 1% from this guy, 1% from this guy. I'm done. I'm giving you platform. Choose what you like. But the problem in that platform is when the farmer is traveling 700 kilometers to go to this particular place, he is sleeping under the benches in inhuman conditions. Next day when he is selling, he is so frustrated that he has to sell it. And when he has sold it, people are giving him cash, wads of cash. It's unsecured. That cash in his pocket, by the time he comes home, it will be gone. Half of it or 25% of it will gone with friends. That's human psychology. You have cash in your pocket, you can't keep it. None of us can keep our excitement within ourselves. That's the problem. How many of us have this economic sanity of saying, okay, I have 1 lakh rupees in my account and I won't splurge it? We don't have that economic sanity. I think you reached self-fulfillment if you can do this. But agrarian society who's basically looking at that money once a month or once in 3 months, do you think he has the patience of waiting for that money to splurge? He will splurge. And that's exactly what happens in the industry. While on the other hand, the yarn manufacturer who's walking into these markets, he is basically looking at different materials. Sometimes he gets outbid by 1 rupee, 2 rupee by some other competitor. And some days are such that if you have a capacity of taking 400 kgs of input on a per day basis, you're not able to pick up 200 kgs also. Hence your overhead cost for that day. How do you continue to maintain it? And hence you try and squeeze from wherever you can. Plus, these yarn manufacturers have a cycle. They sell their produce once in 7 days, but have to buy their input every day in cash. It's a very dangerous cycle that they are playing. This trader doesn't come in to the facility once in 7 days, they're doomed. They go to Muthoot Gold Finance and to subjugate golds of their wives to conducively run their factories. It's a dangerous territory. And we all talk about financial inclusion, but that ain't happening here. So yeah, that's the whole purpose of this supply chain, but they have different problem statements at different levels.
So why is Mayank the best placed to build ReshaMandi? There are other brilliant people who have come out of NIFT, built successful careers. Why is Mayank and his co-founder a best place for building this?
Why is Mayank and my co-founder best placed? I don't know if I am best placed. Possibly we are the first place. See, I have gone through NIFT alums, right? I've seen our alumni. I love all of my seniors, but sorry to say this to all my seniors. Guys, have some balls. It's about risk-taking ability to be in them. I risked my entire career, my entire savings. Saurabh came back from US with a 9-month-old daughter in his hand. His ailing mother and father left US, a well-paying job, sold all his Uber stock and came to. That's how we funded ReshaMandi for the first 6 months, through my saving and his Uber stocks. Have that courage. If you have the courage, you can solve for 100 things. But the problem is, where is the courage? Look at NIFT alumni list and try and find me people who have built business apart from BlackBerry founder, the guy who's created that brand. There is no mass brand that we have been able to create. We have created designer labels of it. We cater to very niche customers. And that is the mindset that even today persists in NIFTs. You go to NIFT college, you will realize that they are basically training you to become a designer. Fashion designing course or textile design course or all the design courses are training you to become high-end luxury designers. They are not training you to become a commercial designer. Apparel production guys, however, the technology that I came from, the specialization I have, the course teaches you to basically think about mass production, just behind the scene of fashion industry. And I think if 1 or 2 more of us actually penetrate this industry with a thought that, okay, we can change the industry and the thought process of the industry, we can shake its root, then I think some changes will happen. It's still far-fetched. Why is Saurabh an important asset at ReshaMandi or for this industry? How many of us at NIFT can claim to have a friend who has 14 patents in deep tech under his belt? It's about finding that synergy. Saurabh and I are school friends. But generally, when we go to our own specialization, that become our group. We don't connect. We don't connect. Primarily, we don't talk about each other's language. If I don't know how to talk to a deep tech guy, I won't be able to have a connection, and forget about me being a co-founder with him. Thankfully for me, I have had a very flavorful career. I have been part of a retail high-end brand, then an e-commerce company, and then I had my own company. And then finally, I pivoted towards user experience and product development and had the flavor of industry, of IT. I can talk his language. So if he is saying that I need a DHT110 sensor in IoT device, I will understand it. If he is saying here's how the mobile app will get built, whether it will be a native or an hybrid, and here is what I can do, I can use a wrapper of a Sencha around it, I will understand it because I've sold this in the market. The problem is both these industries colliding has never happened before because none of these guys were talking to each other. I think the combination of a technology guy having a fashion friend and a fashion guy having a technology friend, that is why possibly we are the first. I don't know about the best.
Extremely interesting when you mentioned that, people from NIFT just happen to make high-end labels catering to a premium customer. I was just thinking how it's not just in fashion. I think almost everywhere, especially in a market like India. When you're a smaller player, you cater to the cream of the market where you can make money quickly and then possibly trickle down. But I think for the lack of education in business or for the lack of capital for a lot of people, the fact that they're always trying for almost decades to just make money from the top layer, they're unable to go to the profit pools at the bottom where there is actual money to be made in the masses. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. My next question is, I was trying to draw analogies, and I think almost everyone who's probably going to be listening to this podcast would think that they're kind of like the Amazon of the textile industry. They're kind of like the Zomato of natural fibers. And what we've seen with these kind of platforms is that initially they're enablers where they also create jobs for a lot of people. First, you're solving for the existing players, and then you solve it so efficiently for the existing players that a lot more people come into this ecosystem, identifying the profit opportunity, and then make money. And then that's how you grow. And at some point, the business grows large enough where there is either the risk of becoming a monopoly or antagonizing almost everyone that you are putting on the platform because they feel the entire profit pool is going to this one marketplace and there's nothing left for us. Do you think something similar would happen for ReshaMandi? I hope not in the negative way. But my question here is, are you creating more opportunities for people to come into natural fibers who are right now at the periphery, who are not coming into it because they look at other farmers who are not making money? Do you think more people are coming in? And possibly the risk of going much beyond is probably not higher because the market size is smaller. So I'm confused. Maybe you will be able to articulate it better.
Okay. So regenerated and natural fiber space globally is a $450 billion market. Is the market small? Of course not. Silk in India is a 10 billion plus market. Silk. We are still an import deficit. $30 billion is with China, which we can take over. So imagine a 40 billion industry only on silk. That is the potential of India. Now, if I talk about the simple, I've done a bottoms-up thesis on silk because I started there and I had to convince all my investors in this. My bottoms-up thesis says there are 45 lakh farmers in India. Even if we are looking at per acreage yield and things like that, and you continue to add the economics or how the conversion functions, you're looking at India's potential of growing to become a $75 billion silk industry. That's not even what the global market is as on today. That's India's potential. How much of acreage we have under mulberry? Problem is the farmers who have been practicing this have not been knowing how to do it scientifically. The scientist community or the research community does their job and they've been doing very effective job. Like the shift of CB Gold to bivoltine variety or double hybrid variety of silkworm in India is a great shift because it's a very conducive crop and it yields better results. It gives you a better yarn and hence the better pricing for the farmer as well. This is what the scientific community of India has been able to do and achieve. Problem is, how do we penetrate the science to the farm? For that to happen, you need a platform which can communicate their language in their own language, give them nuances in their own language. Munje goda to munje goda hi sahi. It has to be that language. You have to talk that language with all these stakeholders. Like my call center is getting a call from Dadar in Bhuleshwar, and he is saying Safed mein 60 chahiye or 1 lakh meters chahiye. This guy will understand it's 60s cambric that he's been talking about. We're not talking about anything else. That is the efficiency that is needed in the platform, right? How has Zomato become a platform? Because it understands your needs. It understands what you like to eat, your eating patterns, and hence offers you something on a Friday evening that you prefer. Similarly, if my platform can continue to learn as to what the demand looks like of this industry and continue to emerge automatically solving it, things will it become a I'm not sure. Can you become a monopoly at any given point in time? Reliance is the kings of polyester, but could have they become the monopoly? I don't think so. It's a very large market for many players to come in and go sometimes. So I think it's an evolution that is yet to happen. The industry is yet to see what changes we are bringing in. We are a 3-year-old company. I don't think Rome is built in a day. None of the companies are built in 3 years. If you want a long-lasting legacy, it will have to continue. It will have to continue for at least next 10, 15 years, doing the same thing over and over again, making sure that there is enough education given out in the industry, enough education has come back from the industry to us, and we are able to rest to that feedback. That is when ReshaMandi can become a large enough name in the industry. The simplest vision is, yes, we want to clothe the humankind in natural fibers. That's the simple vision statement. But for that to happen, it will take time. It will take ages before we do it. I would love a Meryl Streep wearing an Indian silk sari and walking a red carpet in Oscars. I would love it. But that day hasn't arrived as yet.
So given that you do assume that the silk industry within India could be a $75 billion industry, you have evolved from silk to other varieties of natural fiber.
Yep.
Why has that happened?
The Indian SME retailers or the corporate brands, they don't only on silk. How many times do you buy a silk shirt in menswear? You don't. That's the challenge. And how many times are the silk sarees really coming to the wardrobes of our wives and our sisters and our mothers? Once, twice a year. If ReshaMandi wouldn't have been there, my wife wouldn't have had 200 silk sarees, to be very honest. So I think the diversification happened because of the demand, because you're trying to continue to work with these wallet shares of the retailers. And you're trying to see, okay, what is the diversification that they want, they expect from me? Because if I'm just playing on silk, I can only offer them silk curtains, silk sarees, which are more exclusive. My market size will continue to remain that much. I want to increase my market size. Let me start experimenting. So rather than going bottoms up on any of our next supply chain, we went top down. Silk, we built bottoms up. We knew the flywheels as to how it could get created. We knew what was the mechanics of creating this entire supply chain. So coming top down helped us because now we had the demand. We were the buyers in the supply chain. When you become the buyer in the supply chain, the next guy works with you, the next guy works with you automatically. And that is how we also started in silk. I became the buyer for the farmer. I didn't go and sold them silkworms at the start. Nothing would have worked. IoT device, thappad maar ke nikalta tha mujhe. Because I was the buyer and I was assuring him quality-based pricing, that is why the silk farmer worked with me. Similarly, because I'm the buyer in the supply chain, the second guy starts working with me. So we started generating and looking at what are the different avenues that we need to possibly get. Cotton was, of course, where we knew that we wanted to penetrate the entire supply chain. But in linen's case, we didn't penetrate the entire supply chain. We didn't go to the farmers. We started working with the yarn manufacturers. We developed our own fabrics and then we went out because the farmers are in Europe. They're not in India. I can't work with them. Flax does not happen in. Different categories have different nuances. If I'm going and buying in cotton, right? If you're looking at Indian cotton and you're basically thinking cambrics, you think finer fabrics coming up. You're looking at Uzbekistani cotton, which is yellow in color, can only dye in indigos and hence denims, right? Egypt, and you're thinking bedsheets, correct? There is a reason because there is a fineness attached to it. There is a quality attached to that of where it is getting produced. Even in India, there is different varieties that are available. Different industries, stakeholders have different requirements. Sometimes they will basically say, okay, I need Maharashtrian silk. I only need this cotton. I only need this cotton. It has to come from this particular acreage. Why is that? Because I have a end use in mind. This supply chain is a complicated math and complicated science. We don't understand textile as an industry very well as an end consumer. We have to tone it down for the end consumer every time. And that is what ReshaMandi has been trying to do. When we are talking in our blogs, we are trying to make it very human-like. We're trying to talk their own language just so that people understand. When we are talking about hemp and fabric being produced out of hemp, we kind of give it a different flavor. When we are comparing our numbers, you would have seen when we compare our numbers, we try and tell them that this much yardage of yarn is just one aspect, but I can also say that, okay, this can cover 8 times the earth, and it's much more easier to relate to that visual. So it's about, we kind of defines it for the end consumer and continue to work with.
I think I'm very intrigued all the things you've told us about cotton, Uzbekistan being used for denims and from being used for bedsheets. While, of course, I could make some connections, but I think this is definitely a great refresher, which also brings me to my last question, which is, for other white spaces that you see in this textile or fabric market, had you not started ReshaMandi, what would have been another exciting white space for you to build in, which maybe your NIFT alums can also, and as listeners of this podcast could?
I create a company after National Geographic when I came out of there. That was primarily about helping the artisans and weaving community in India, creating demand for them. Now, it's a very big white space in handicraft. There are two parts, right? We have handlooms and we have handicrafts. Leave handlooms aside. There is a large industry of handicrafts in India, divided between metal craft, cane craft, bamboo, you have rock, and you have seashells, and you have embroidery techniques, printing techniques, so much of variety there. But the problem is no platform built on top of the supply chain ever. Because each of these different crafts are in different pockets of India. Each of them have different material requirement, demand coming up from the industry. For you to be able to become a platform on top of this, you need to understand each one of these crafts differently and then be able to create demand for them differently or create supply lines for them different. Hence, I saw it was effectively the same thing as to how ReshaMandi was realized, right? So if you start by saying that I want to be a horizontal platform, then you won't be able to solve for anything. If you solve for one, it'll be easier. So if you pick up Lucknowi chicken curry as a problem statement and solve for that, then you can replicate, because Lucknow se paas mein hi, there is a leather hub in Kanpur. You can solve for that next. And then go to Agra and solve for the marble work of Agra there. Then go to Mathura and solve for the handcraft or the painting that they do on marble. Solve for that next. And then come to Gajraula and Delhi finally. And then solve for the fine arts of Delhi. It's a chain as to how you pick up and how you continue to build around that stone. Yes, that's a huge white space.
How do you break down the story of Fab India?
Fab India started by saying that we want to help the society, and they did. They are the effective guys who created a brand, who were able to impart so much of ground intelligence to our viewers, being able to work with our handloom viewers. It is difficult. It's a difficult community to work with because it's deeply rooted in India. You have to penetrate very, very low in India. You're going beyond B and C class towns of India, going to a village, having to have worked in a village. And I've gone to these. I'm not joking. It's tiresome for you to work with them, tell them what design, tell them how you want the consistency and quality, and continue to evolve that over a period of time, and a beautiful brand gets created. Amazing job there. Great. All that happened. But now is the time when, yes, I understand you want to go to an IPO and you want to show to the world that there is a profit pool that you are looking at. And I understand that from a commercial standpoint. But I think we're losing the essence of why Fab India started. I would love Fab India to be that beacon of hope for all of us. They will continue to work with this society. Shrujan, Fab India, these are classic examples of how India evolved in social welfare. And I think that story shouldn't get faded, is what I would say. That's how I look at it.
I think Fab India is weaved into our livelihoods or like everyday life now. I truly hope, having heard your story, that ReshaMandi also is one day able to achieve that. Honestly, I never think about the cloth I'm wearing, where it's coming from. It's a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
And somebody is toiling in the sun to get us where we stand today.
Correct.
Brilliant. Mayank, that's a great place to close the conversation. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, guys. Thanks. Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who will find it valuable. For any recommendations and feedback, you can drop me a line at Pritish@1%.live. Until next time.